This is our last Saturday of the month. Hard to believe. Very excited to actually broadcast our first show of 2026. Oh my gosh, I almost thought it was 2027 here. All right, so we're very excited about our guest today and with our Now Conversations, which is Conversations with Authors. We like to say we can ask questions that only a book publisher can ask our book authors. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about him, and he's waiting backstage here, so I won't embarrass him and bring him up while I read some greatness about his bio. And what I did is I cherry picked some of the favorite things I know about him. So Dr. Saunders is a distinguished chiropractor with a PhD in molecular biology and an expertise in regenerative medicine with a passion for helping people. He is driven by a desire to make a broader impact, and he's devoted his life, his professional life, to research and education and expanding the accessibility to healthcare for professionals and patients alike. He's also a board member and part of the faculty for both the International Board of Undersea Medicine and the International Hyperbaric Association. That's going to be very important in our discussion today. It's a super unique area of practice he has. And then his ultimate goal is to bridge the gap between cutting edge healthcare solutions and the patients that need him both. And he is also a 5-time author. And we're going to talk about his latest offering, but he is a speaker as well. So thank you so much, Dr. Saunders, for joining us this early Saturday morning. Welcome.
It is my pleasure, Liza. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So much to talk about in so little time. We have less than 30 minutes. So there's so much that I would like you to share on Now Conversations. So let's start with your publishing journey, and we'll kind of start where we got here. And then I want to really dig into, the why of the books and the messages that you've shared over the years. But just to, kick off, a lot of people watch the show because they are budding authors or they're published authors, and they just are they're readers. They love books. So yes, I'm proud to say that you've published 3 books with us, and we've known each other now for maybe a couple of years. Time flies.
Yes,
but I know, right? But I know you're a 5-time book author, and your first book, which is available, called Wellness to the Core, you first became published in 2015. Can you share how that happened, and what prompted you to become a published author, and now looking back, what was your journey like?
I mean, that first book was essentially a journey in frustration in a lot of ways. The first being the concepts that I found myself in repeating over and over and over again. And I thought, I've said this a number of times, even individually to any given patient, and then, repeatedly to patients over time. And I felt, gee, I wish there was just a way that I could say, here, read this, and when you're finished, let's talk, and that way we would have a much better understanding of some of the background as far as that book goes, how to take better care of yourself, why it's important to take care of yourself, and what role would an office like mine play in somebody essentially trying to improve their health. And so I thought, let me just get all of this out of my head. Let me get it, out of my mouth, essentially onto paper. And that's really, that was the driving force for that first book. Not to mention, I think that the publishing journey was frustrating too at that time. I wasn't sure where to go, how to get it done, who to use, like all of those pieces were a big part of a learning curve for me, for sure.
Well, and it's interesting because that was the same year that I published my first book with the Morgan James Publishing. And it wasn't so readily accessible then, where you could just, we never had AI, but even in Google, you couldn't say, hey, what are the forums to make a book? Because I remember that was the thing. Like, I think I found like one when I was looking, and it was awful, but it just, the resources weren't there. And it was definitely a different climate now versus 10 years ago with all the book coaches, all the author coaches, all the publishing companies. I mean, it's multiplied by a ton of numbers. And even the industry publishing industry, which doesn't really have like industry standards, even that is just a whole different look than it was back then. So congratulations on publishing at that time, because that was even a heavier lift. I mean, it was definitely, the publishing journey now still takes a lot of effort, as you know, and takes a lot of resources in all the areas. So thanks for sharing that. And congratulations again on being an early book author, so to speak. What I'd like to do, though, is it's very important for our viewers to know that your latest offering, which is your book 5, has been now released and is available everywhere. And what I love about this book, and what I want us to make sure that we drive home to, is the very uniqueness of this field guide. So the book itself is called The Fulfilled Guide for the Fulfilled Physician. And so even though it's a separate offering and it is a standalone book, it is complementary to what I just showed on screen, which is The Fulfilled Physician, which released last year. So can you tell the viewers about the uniqueness of the book, and especially who it's for, because it's not just for medical doctors. It's not just for doctors. It's not just for business owner physicians with a practice. It's for all readers, if you would.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess every book that I've written, obviously, like anybody, has a unique purpose, and it tends to be driven by whomever it is that I'm working with at the time. So that first one, I was working with patients. That was a much more heavily patient focused book. The next book was really about hyperbaric oxygen. We were talking about that earlier. Actually, the next 2 books were hyperbaric focused, because professionally, that's where a lot of my work is certainly focused, as far as helping people understand hyperbarics, learning about hyperbarics, getting certified in hyperbarics, and then building practices. And so professionally, I'm now working far more with, physicians, and I see the challenge of a business owner. Being, first it's like, hey, I can do this on my own as well or better than I can working at this place. And we go into this, entrepreneurial drive, and, without a really good plan, that's a long and winding road. And so, I wrote it, The Fulfilled Physician, and obviously it sounds very physician driven, and it is, because that's what I am and that's who I'm trying to help. But essentially, it's really an exercise in learning who you are, learning what you're here to do, like what is your purpose in whatever decisions you're making professionally. How do you help define who you are and why you're here and what you're trying to accomplish, and building a foundation of, crystal clear focus in terms of, direction. I think that a lot of people think that they have this idea of like where they're heading and where they're going, but without the planning involved, that road becomes very long and winding. And I'm essentially trying to help shortcut that journey from point A to point B, along with things like, what does a work day look like for you, and what would you like it to look like? Does your standard day feel, fulfilled, or does it feel like it's chaos, right? Like, who are the people that you're here to serve? Who are you trying to help with whatever it is that you do professionally? And then essentially build, your business, your practice, build it in your mind, build it on paper, and then start sharing those messages with your community, and the people that align with those messages will start to get behind you. But when nobody really knows who you are, what you stand for, it's harder to connect with the people who you're trying to serve, which means you'll either not connect with enough people to sustain your business, or you'll find that you're connecting with people, but even your clients or your patients, whatever, aren't connected in the way that we all want those, human connections to be, or, it's not the right people that you're trying to affect or you're trying to serve. And so it's really, it's building the blocks of preparing yourself. And that doesn't matter if you're first getting into business in this moment, or, you know, you've been in business 15, 20 years, you're looking back thinking, gosh, this isn't what I was hoping. This isn't what I was thinking it was going to be like. You know, clearly what you had in your mind and the path that was taken, you know, led to a different place. And so it's never too late to redefine who you are, what you do, and where you want to go. And then with redefining, recreating a series of steps and plans for rebuilding and reconnecting with the business that you were hoping for, and the clients that you were hoping to serve. And then, you know, the third part of the book is really like fundamental business in terms of understanding the numbers, how to assess the health of your business through analyzing the statistics of your clinic or your business in terms of, you know, sales and return on investment, and, you know, how frequently somebody comes back for your services or for your products. And so it's really, the third part is being, you know, learning how to take the pulse of your business, and very quickly on a month-to-month basis be able to track that health and know that you're still trending in the direction that you set out in the first place for.
Very well said. You reminded me of one of the key areas that I loved about your book when we were building it, and it's both in the Fulfilled Physician and also in the Field Guide for the Fulfilled Physician, is, as you stated, that you need to make sure that you understand the personal relationship, so to speak, with your clients, with your patients, but also your team. And then also that goes back to who you are, right? And understanding yourself. There are a gazillion business books out there. I've read a lot of them. Usually that's not an area that the business goes into, honestly. I mean, some will go into communication and how important that is, but really going into, and I'm recalling, you know, I read all of the books in our publishing house, and I recall that kind of making me pause for a minute. And I really love the fact that you didn't hold back in any area of a business owner's business, in my opinion, to address it in some way. So that's very, I think, unique. One of the other things I want you to talk about is that in the Fulfilled Physician book, you do, even we talked about bringing up, so this is the initial book offering, where you do, you know, give hands-on in terms of, okay, here's some formulas. Here's also that you need to know to do the assessment. Maybe, you know, is your business viable? What is your net revenue? And those kind of things. But you also say, okay, here's the questions that you need to ask and answer. Here's the questions that maybe you need to put out to clients. And so then because you have in the initial offering that kind of an ask and that kind of hands-on, then you also, though, realized as you're building this that, well, you know what, I can really even go deeper, and I want a tool. I want a deeper tool to help people, help readers. So can you dig in a little bit more into the Field Guide and how that came together, which is the book that is recently released?
Yeah. So, I mean, each chapter of the original Fulfilled Physician was, these were I think either the decisions that I made throughout my journey that helped redirect my own clarity in my own business. Each one of them was a sticking point in the business journey that I found, and have found similar in the people that the clinics and the doctors and the business owners that I consult with. And what I tried to do with the Fulfilled Physician, in the book, it's not the order that I went through in my experience, because my experience was a long and winding road, as I was explaining earlier. But if I were to look back on all of those years and try to create a flow of information that would have made more sense to shortcut that A to B, that's really what I did in the Fulfilled Physician. Is I took, not the order I went through, but the order that I wish somebody had given it to me in, because that would have led me to a much faster and more, clear path in terms of direction from a business standpoint. And so that's kind of the flow of information for that first offering. But as a busy business owner, I also know that people like to, digest as much information as quickly as possible and kind of get through to try to, glean all the high points and the important pieces. And then they might even because there's, essentially there's, exercises to go through after each chapter, homework, so to speak, and everybody wants to potentially skip the homework and just get to the next chapter. And I'm just being honest, like it won't work like that. It won't work unless you literally take the time at each point to do the exercises, to get the clarity. There's no magic bullet. There's no magic answer that solved everybody's business problems. And by starting in the beginning and giving each section the time that it needs, the time required to really gain the clarity to take the next step is critical. And so exactly, the field guide was put together as an attempt to just, almost make a journal out of the original Fulfilled Physician book, and create a space where that business owner can collect all of that information, can collect all of those thoughts, can really build the business on paper and gain the clarity at each step of the way. So, rather than either just reading it and kind of just thinking through some of the concepts, but then moving on, or, jotting them down, but then losing where they put the information, I wanted to create like one location where all the exercises and assignments can live. Somebody could even go through the field guide without reading the Fulfilled Physician, essentially, though I wouldn't recommend it. But, it's a standalone, field guide, a working guide for getting through the information in the Fulfilled Physician, but also a space to do the work, to think out loud and to collect your ideas and concepts so that you can move through the material.
Thank you for that. One more aspect that is, I think, super unique and I love about both the Fulfilled Physician and the Field Guide is the Michael story and how you set up the reader with a real life example. Explain how that came to be and what I'm talking about.
So, I had written the book just as a standard, chapter book, let's say. So all the material was essentially there, but I know that there's a different style, and we talk about this back to the relationship side of your question earlier. Different people learn in different ways, and some people learn far more linearly. Like, here is the information that I want to present to you, and some people learn, I think, a little bit more emotionally. They connect to somebody's journey, and they learn through the experiences of the characters in the book, and so, in an attempt to try to create a single source of information that touches on both of those types of learning styles, I presented it linearly, and at the end of each chapter is this story of Michael Evans and his journey in business, and quite honestly, in almost every way possible, the story of Michael Evans is my story, and I'm sharing a lot of the journey that I went through as a business owner. At each step through each chapter, but this way it kind of creates that linear fashion. You also see it taking place in somebody's life, and that becomes a lot more relatable as opposed to just an abstract concept. When you hear how Michael goes through that and you see how he's handling each of those steps, it gives us a concrete way to understand how that might be showing up in our own lives, in our own business. And just to comment on the relationship concept that you were saying earlier, no matter what business we're in, at one point I was a full-time practicing chiropractor. At another point, I'm, essentially a full-time educator. At another point, I'm, doing research, or I'm consulting with businesses. Every one of the roles that I've played professionally and personally, I mean, everything has to do with the quality and the level of relationships that we have. And our life experiences are also direct correlated to the quality of those relationships. And so we do spend a lot of time in the book on relationship building, because that's what it's all about. I might have been doing this service or this other service, but I'm in the relationship business. And if you really look at your own life and your own business, you are too. And until we really face that and then learn that different people need different styles of communication. Different people hear things or say things in their own ways. And we have to be able to remove our own defense mechanisms. Sometimes we have to be able to remove our own masks and shields to allow for that information in, in a non-judgmental way, that we can understand what someone's trying to communicate to us. And then we need to be able to have different ways that we're communicating with the people that we're serving, because we can think we said something, they heard something else, and then there's a break in the trust, a break in the rapport. And maybe it had nothing, it wasn't intentional. It's just the way it was delivered and the way it was received. And so, building a foundation of awareness of that concept, and then using that concept in whatever businesses, each of us are in, it will pay dividends, not only from a financial standpoint, which of course, if you're in business, that's an important component, but it will pay dividends just in your quality of life and your ability to do what it is that you're trying to do, and the success, how successful we are at helping people in their lives in whatever way that we're serving them will be amplified when we're able to build those relationships at a much higher level.
1,000%. Gosh, there's so much that I'd like to stay on, but we won't have enough time to talk about it. But, and that easier said than done as far as the self-awareness and the people awareness. And, because there's all types out there. And also, I say this quite a bit. I just said it recently again. I said, there's no one right book publisher for everyone, just like there's no one right chiropractor for everyone, and so sometimes there's learning experiences there, but you need to be aware to give them in the right place, is how I look at it. How can I help you if what we're doing is not going to help you? Then you still want to be published, and I still want to help you in your journey. How can I still help even if you're not a client? And so I'm sure, it's just that idea of coming at a place of awareness to do what you want to do, which is help people, which is what you do in your practice. Okay, I do want to take a moment because I really want you to talk about what does it mean being a faculty and board member of both the International Board of Undersea Medicine and the International Hyperbaric Association, because I want to announce, I know I've told you and your co-author before, this book was the first book that we published with you guys, The Art and Science of Hyperbaric Medicine. And oh, by the way, the website, your website where you can connect and reach, know everything about Dr. Saunders is on the ticker there. But this book is definitely the best-selling book in our company's history. So congratulations, and please share if people have never heard what hyperbaric medicine is.
So, we've been offering hyperbarics just from a clinical standpoint for over 20 years. It's been a huge part of my own personal practice, and, going through the journey of offering it, seeing the impact that it has, which is, incredible impact on some really, really sometimes devastating cases, or in other times it's something that can be used for someone who's already moderately healthy, but looking to, optimize their biology. But essentially it's a tool that it's probably one of the only, if not the only tool that can really amplify the amount of oxygen that our body's carrying. And as we deliver higher levels of oxygen into somebody's body, a number of different processes are stimulated, from helping to improve immune function, helping to reduce inflammation, helping to stimulate the repair and regeneration of cells and tissues, improving energy production. There's a whole range of pathways that are really amplified by driving this extra level of oxygen into somebody's body. I've now been teaching hyperbarics for about 7-8 years through the International Board of Undersea Medicine. And so the IHA, which is the International Hyperbaric Association, is a nonprofit organization who helps educate doctors, holds conferences, and creates materials for people to learn more about hyperbaric. And the International Board of Undersea Medicine is a training organization where we certify, doctors, physicians, clinicians, or other licensed health professionals and technicians in hyperbaric medicine. And so Dr. Dettori and I, co-authored this book, and really there are a few, to your point. I mean, this is still an emerging industry, although in the last 3 years it's grown, 10 times more than the 20 years prior. It's still in its infancy, quite honestly. It's growing very rapidly. The awareness of it, the impact that it has is incredible. And the textbooks that are out there have been, they're not an easy read. They're not really detailed in the applications of hyperbarics. Most of them are more of a collection of hyperbaric research papers put together into some, organized fashion, but not as a way to really use it in practice or apply hyperbarics in practice, or to even understand hyperbarics at the level that Dr. Dettori and I like to teach it. And so this book came out of that place where we said, listen, if you're interested in hyperbaric medicine, if you're practicing hyperbaric medicine or thinking about it, number one, here's our courses that we teach to help people bridge the gap between what it is that they're doing in practice today and how to actually apply hyperbaric and where does it fit inside their practice. But here's a book that is literally, in my opinion, or even in Dr. Dettori's opinion, it's literally the physician's desk reference for hyperbaric medicine. And it, unlike other textbooks, even in other subjects, where you might just pick up a chapter and try to like understand certain concepts, like we designed this to really be a read from cover to cover. And the flow of information builds on chapter by chapter, taking you from this is where it came from, this is how we apply it, here's the science as we know it today, here's how we can use that to calculate dosage and things like this of hyperbarics. But most importantly, here's the mechanisms of action, here's what it's actually doing to people physiologically. And once we understand that, here are the different indications that are appropriate. Here are the different pathways that we can use hyperbaric to stimulate or to, help improve physiologically. And then here are some protocols, and all the research associated with anything in that book is, it's incredibly well cited. This textbook is, like that should be. But it's a pathway of understanding and then applying and implementing hyperbarics from beginning to end. So we've been incredibly happy with this book, and the feedback we're getting on it has also been very positive.
100% on the feedback being positive. And with this large of a book, actually, it is probably our largest word count book, probably. Hadn't thought about that. But you would expect that if there were people had issues with it or didn't find it, we would hear about it. Zero complaints about that, zero feedback that way. And you made me smile because I was thinking about the publishing journey with you guys on this book, and where you said it was incredibly well cited. What did we have, like 800 some? And I might have even washed it out of my memory. 800 some.
Probably washed it out of her memory.
Yeah. So probably, but I think the number is probably even more than that by the time the reconciliation. But, the other mention, and here we are, we're almost out of time, darn it. The other note I think that's important to mention about this book, The Art and Science of Hyperbaric Medicine, is that I even hesitate to call it a textbook because it is so well put together. I read it and I felt like I had a very good understanding of hyperbaric medicine coming from zero right to it. So it's just a fabulous book, as is all the books that you have. Gosh darn it, we're going to continue. I'm going to ask you one last question, and then also I want to make sure that everyone knows how they can buy your books here. And I thought I had it ready to go. Here we go. We do have a bundle on your books, and it's showing right now. But can you give a budding author some advice, or what would you say to someone, especially like you, a business owner, someone that has repeated information and a depth of experience that they want to share with the world? That's like, I should write a book. I think I should write a book. I want to. What kind of advice would you give them, being a 5-time author?
Yeah, it's the first time. It's a scary journey. Number one, you have to do it. If you're called to do it, you have that book in you. You have to get it out. It will haunt you forever if you don't get the words out. And what it'll help you do is it'll also help you craft and organize the information far better than you ever thought that you could, because your initial release of information is kind of like word vomit. And then by going through the publishing journey, you're forced to really hone and craft your message and get it as tight as you can. And as a result, you'll be incredibly empowered to know that A, you got your message out the way you wanted to, B, you were able to serve people in that way, and C, you can now have a tool that says, hey, I'm an expert in this, and I know this information really well, and I've created this content for you, and I'm delivering it in this organized way for you to learn and for you to absorb the information that we're sharing. So, you have to do it. You have to take that step. If there's that calling in you, it's there, and it's nowhere near as difficult or as daunting as it may feel today. And the results are always going to be worth it.
Thank you so much for being here on Now Conversations. And yes, just take the first step to anything that you want to achieve, right? So please, you can find Dr. Jason Saunders at the hbotcourse.com. We've been running his website, and join us. You'll be very excited to read The Fulfilled Physician and the Field Guide for the Fulfilled Physician, and just all things business success related. So happy publishing, happy writing. Thank you again for joining us, Dr. Saunders.
Thank you.